From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Beres here on a Monday. How are you doing? It's good to see you. I hope you had a good weekend. We have a good show on tap for you this morning. You're going to want to stick around. All kinds of crazy stuff is going to happen. Typically it doesn't, because he's more of a button-down guy, okay? Because he has to run the jail here in Davidson County. But this morning the sheriff had to go off and do something that I still question to this very morning, and I'm just glad he did this in the middle of summer when it's 90 degrees out instead of in the winter. Thank goodness the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge is happening during the warm summer months. With us this morning is Davidson County Sheriff Daron Hall. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Nick. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm fine. You're just so proud of yourself.
You know, beautiful Monday.
Yeah, it's a beautiful Monday. Well, I mean, we saw the mayor last week. Just about everyone these days have been doing the Ice Bucket Challenge. You had been challenged, right?
Right.
By a friend or an enemy?
John Pugh, who runs the Morning Star, the domestic violence shelter, was one of them. I've had others on. My mother actually called me and told me it was on Facebook and you need to go. So I saw that one, and I've had several others. And but a dear friend of mine who passed away a few years ago from ALS, and kind of been a supporter of that cause. It used to be Amy's Army, and we were all involved. And a real good friend of mine, Robert Gowan, was his wife, and just a very tough disease, very tough subject, and went through that. Of course, the Lou Gehrig story is always, as a kid, a part of it, but just a great cause, and then I'm just fascinated with the phenomena that's just taken off.
It is taken off. I mean, I think it'll go on for another few weeks, and hopefully people don't forget and still give to this cause, but the whole idea of people, I hope it doesn't become cliche to the point where, you know, it's just the Ice Bucket Challenge, it's fun to watch and people's reaction, but behind it all, the key is really, hopefully, you know, you take the challenge, you still make a donation, and it's to help people. Right.
I mean, you know, I saw some friends of mine that sent some stuff. I think they were from Louisville, and I really liked what they did. They actually, most of them wrote their checks out, and that was before you could be dumped. You had to put the, you know, and there, I saw some Metro Council members here in town that if you'll donate $100, you don't have to be dumped with water. You can do $20. So it's kind of a fun, because ultimately it's not about the water. And,
right. No.
We're trying to. I think you're right. It needs to be. You know, some of these pro sports teams and so forth. I mean, if they all are donating money, and I've seen the numbers, the ALS is staggering.
Well, you saw the Titans. They did that for their former player. I forget his name.
Shaw.
That's right. And you know, they all came out there. And so anyway, if that's what gets you to do it and take notice of it, for a lot of us for the first time, fair enough. So you challenged me, I think, right? I mean, I know we have the clip, but I know it's for the good cause, but I think you also, it seems to me, will relish the opportunity to dump cold water on me. And if that's true, that's fine. I thought we were friends.
There are people who talk a lot and talk themselves into getting in trouble, and I just thought the first name that came to mind is the person who agitates the most.
You've arrested me before.
Anything we can do. Anything we can
At the end of the program today, we'll be heading up and outside, and we're going to have it all set up, and we'll do this live on the air. So we'll do it, and we'll have the clip to show when Mary has that queued up later, you know, at some point, to remind folks of when you did it. And boy, you were doused big time. That was not a bucket.
There are some former employees now that targeted all that. I didn't know how much water.
You mean now former employees?
That's right. They're now former. They may be in the video, but they're former employees after that. It was Lordy mercy. And again, it's like you said. I mean, it's 95 degrees outside, which sounds like a good thing, but the stark contrast between 95 and whatever ice water is.
Like getting blasted.
Oh,
well,
my gosh.
It's fun. That's part of it. It's fun to watch. So we'll show you that, and then stick around, because the last segment of the program we'll be heading up, and we'll see. And I reserve the right to change my mind. So, you know, I mean, what?
Yeah, change your mind,
We'll see how that plays out.
You haven't changed your personality, that's what got you in this trouble.
That's exactly it. All right, listen, the number is 737-7587. Wanted to let you know about that going on. But there's a lot to talk about this morning, and last week we dedicated at least 3 of our programs to the whole situation out of Missouri, you know, Ferguson. And I wanted to get your take on this. As we've seen now, it seems to have calmed down a bit, okay, over the last few days. But you consider just the unrest, and if something like this could happen here or anywhere when something like that occurs, your take on that when you saw it happening?
Yeah, you know, it feels to me like throughout the year, if you just take an event, the country kind of gets, you know, captured by a certain circumstance. And my belief is, just like myself, and I consider myself to be someone who's interested in getting down to the facts and figuring it out the best you can. I don't listen to one network or the other as far as those issues because politically. But I do think what happens is people, it's kind of like screaming fire in a theater a little bit. Until we know whether there's a fire, people just run.
Right.
And I believe there's definitely an issue to be addressed, but I'm a little concerned on both sides. People jump to, the facts support their preconceived thoughts.
Yeah.
St. Louis has a history and an issue that's brewing and has been brewing for a while, and the racial tension up there, I understand.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to say I agree with you on the rush to judgment, but do you sense that there is this underlying racial tension that was just waiting for something to spark it, and then people rush to judgment before we know everything that really played out? I think in fairness to both sides, you have to wait for that. And of course, the victim's family is saying, let's make sure, let's stop the violence. But I mean, there's an undercurrent of that, that racial tension there, and a history maybe of them feeling, the African Americans in this community, being disenfranchised by the police department.
And I believe it's a symptom of the problem. I don't necessarily believe it's tragic, and it really is. And I think the facts will play out down the road, years down the road, as it relates to whether the officer or the individual, but I really don't. I believe it's a symptom of the problem. The problem is probably much less disconnect between the community and you know how this is. People act out that really aren't active in the community even, which is another part of it. I think the community itself really wants answers. I don't really think the question they have is about this incident. I mean, yes, there will be questions answered in a courtroom. I think it's about the divide. I forgot the percentage of African American police officers in a community that is, I believe, 67% African American, and you can't always match that up. I mean, it's a very difficult thing to do in recruitment and so forth to keep the numbers matching your community, but that's what you would want. So it's a difficult situation, and I don't think, sure, there can be things happen in any community. The year before, it was the Zimmerman case in Florida, and I think that was a little more about the law that feels a little strange for people. Stand your ground law, and that whole piece was really the subject. I think the symptom was this event, a tragic event of someone getting shot, but people rallied for the cause. I think the real cause is that the law that we want in Florida, for example, and I think in St. Louis it's just the relationship we want between the police and the community in St. Louis, and clearly that's not what you want. But I think people get caught up too much in the details that we don't know. None of us know. But it's not really about that incident. I think ultimately it'll be about the relationship between the community and its law enforcement. And
it's raising a bunch of other questions. I don't know what you have in terms of your arsenal or whatever you have your officers carry. And I know it's a little different than the police department. They're bringing up questions again, and now the president's talking about revisiting whether or not surplus military gear should end up in the hands of local law enforcement. And a lot of departments now have some of this weaponry and some of these armored vehicles and things like this. And it surprised some of the folks there when some of the officers showed up with some of this type of stuff. And I'm just wondering now, for you, do you have any Army surplus stuff with the Sheriff's Department?
We have very little. We apply for things sometimes, like even a boat. That's an example of the flood years ago. We were out there.
Well, some of this stuff seems very handy.
And the cost, and the government already owns it, so why not find it? I think the more practical question is how to use that stuff. I mean, I really don't think that it in itself is. I mean, look, there's some shootings and issues out in L.A. where the people who are involved are wearing full body armor themselves, and I've seen the videos of them robbing banks and running out in the streets and shooting all sorts of different weaponry. And so if you don't watch out, and that's the bad guys, so to speak. I mean, the law enforcement, if you're not careful, need to be able to protect themselves. The armored vehicle, we do not have this, but I have been on the scene. Jerry Newsom was shot in 1995, and at the time that occurred, the individual who did the shooting was still holed up in the house. Didn't know if there were other people inside, hostages, and so forth. And the police department, not us, but the police department didn't even have the ability to get to the house. I mean, you're actually trying to use different shields and so forth. Nowadays, there are vehicles that pull right up to the house to try to assist the hostages in getting out. It's an armored vehicle. But I don't see that. And again, now, granted, if it's used inappropriately in the middle of let's say, a disturbance, and they're using it against people, maybe you could argue that. But be careful not to overreact and to take away some things that are very valuable to help the community. I mean, if you're held hostage and the law enforcement can't get to where you are because literally they're at risk and there's no way to protect them, I think you have to be careful not to overreact. But I think it's a symptom. I really do. I think it's a symptom of what's going on in that community. I think it was a symptom of the issues in Florida as it relates to the stand your ground law. And I would just hope a community like Nashville, as we go through issues, have a relationship built where you can get to the table and talk about it. I feel that way.
Yeah.
And I live here, and I know we've had other issues years ago. We had a very racially tense case with the Reggie Miller, a police officer that was real tense for a long time. And I think that was, kind of a sign of, hey, you better make sure that the communities are together on how we enforce our law here.
A lot of people still talking about it. In fact, we're going to have some more phone calls probably along those lines. And I know the lines are open right now for the sheriff, 737-7587. Got to take a break on that note, but we come back. We'll take your calls, more of our conversation with the sheriff right after this. Stay with us.